You're listening to the Scaling Culture Podcast, where we sit down with thought leaders who share their experiences building incredible workplace cultures. Hilary Corna has over 10 years of experience working in senior executive positions for companies like Toyota Motor Asia Pacific and speaking on stages across the world. Hilary's been featured in the New York Times, Fortune, ForbesWoman, The Wall Street Journal, NBC, and dozens of other publications. As a best-selling author of One White Face, her words have influenced leaders at every level to embrace their own humanity and in turn become more conscious, empathetic, and empowering with those they lead. Hilary's weekly thought-provoking emails are a must-read. In today's episode, Ron and Hilary discuss how do we humanize organizational culture? How do we develop a culture of love and caring? And how do we use automations for the good of the company versus dehumanizing the workplace?
Welcome to another episode of Scaling Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Ron Lovett, and I'm very excited and honored to have Hilary Corna with us today out of Austin, right?
Austin, Texas.
Yeah. How you doing, Hilary?
Living the dream, man. Living the dream.
Yeah. How's things in your world? Things good right now? Chaotic, as you know from our pre-conversation. Things are chaotic for me. I'm having a rough start.
Yeah. I mean, I think this year, I think we're all in a time of reflection and introspection. And what do we have to learn from all this? And if you look back, I think we've all been in hyper growth mode and hyper learning mode. And, you know, those that continue to learn and grow are going to be better off for it. And those that don't are going to be left behind. So it's been a year of struggle with no doubt, a year of pivot, a year of learning, a year of really hard moments and conversations, but we're better off for it.
Yeah, that's well said. I would agree. And look, when we had our kind of pre-podcast conversation, there were some awesome topics that we discussed. And so I'm excited to kind of dive deep into some of these, in some of these lanes, because we haven't discussed them before. So, but just want to thank you for your time today before we get kicked off. I'm excited to dig in.
Rad. So let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's jump in. So look, one of these topics you had mentioned was how companies are over automating today, which has caused a disconnect with people. Tell me more about that. And let's dive into that topic first.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is operations at Toyota. I ran all Kaizen operations development initiatives for the South Pacific region out of Singapore for 3 years. What that means in very, layman terms is I would take the concept of Toyota production system and implement them into the dealerships, which are all entrepreneurs, typically family-owned businesses. And the concept is as simple as how do we improve people's lives and as a result, improve the outcomes of our businesses? And that could be for the employee or the customer. And what's happened over the last 10 years with the rise of such buzzwords as Lean, Six Sigma, even you could go as far as rapid growth, 10X, scaling, all these things that we want out of our business, we've lost touch with the very purpose of these concepts around digital innovation and continuous improvement. And so what I've seen time and time again throughout mid-market industries is that companies are innovating digitally, and now it's expedited by COVID, but they're losing touch with the very people they serve. So they're automating what's good for them and what's good for the business, but very often at the very detriment of the people they serve. So you can create automations that actually create barriers between you and the customer and make it harder for the customer to connect.
Give an example of that. What's an example?
Yeah. So payment terms. I cannot tell you how many times I try to do business with someone, and because of their automations, I either A, can't get in touch with someone very quickly, or B, they make it very difficult to actually pay them. What does that mean? If you're looking at contracts, you're looking at agreements, you're looking at negotiations, they automate their sales process so much that you have to follow their standardized protocol for how to do business with them. And all you're saying is, dude, I'm really ready and able to give you money. Please let me pay you. And so simplifying your sales process, making it about the person going through the process instead of what's good for the company is where companies are really going to rise.
And how do we get, so if we look at company culture, how do we get people involved with that? How do we, encourage our stakeholders, our employees to fight against that and make sure we counterbalance it?
That's the daunting question, right? One of the things I do with a lot of my clients is the stupid rule activity, which is what are your stupid rules in your company that don't make sense and how do you kill them? And so it's an easy thing. Typically, I advise that they do it once a quarter as an activity of reflecting within your quarterly, planning sessions. And you ask your people. So a fun piece of trivia, Toyota every year gets 1 million ideas from their employees worldwide.
How do they get them? Tell me about that. Is it an email,
Channels,
text?
it's all about organization structure. So often the people have ideas for what should be improved, but it's just simply either no one is asking or they don't have a process to actually implement those ideas. They don't have a system or a channel of communications to take that idea, vet it, and decide whether to actually run with it.
But don't some companies overcomplicate that alone? So the process. So all of a sudden I want to become this innovative, nimble company and say, hey, we want to hear from everybody. Please send us your ideas, but fill out this form. Tell us how, go through this big process. The committee will then vet it. And in 6 months, we'll have a discussion. And I've kind of just killed the mojo of the organization. How do you balance process with nimbleness?
It's a great question. And it's an art. I say be human by design. There's a great little video that Gary Vee did a couple of months back that I integrated in my keynote. And it's him talking about, he was posed the question of what his social strategy is. And he picks up his phone and he goes, this is my social strategy. I read the comments. I engage. And the guys and the woman actually that was asking the question was like, yeah, but that's not scalable. How do you actually strategize on your social? And he was like, it's not scalable. That's the whole point. It's human. These are real humans behind the screen. So what I often say to my clients is you need a combination of both a quantitative method and a qualitative method. You need something that is actually a system, a process that's there for those that want to follow that method. Then you also need a process that is unaided, that is listening, that is actively engaging, and you need to balance those two. It's like the mix between yin and yang. You need to actively be searching for it and actively be listening for it.
So visually, what does that look like? Is that where I'm on a website and it says you can, hi, Mr. Lovett, you can do this, choose A, B, C, whatever it is, or you can press, call us at this number and talk to a live human being. And so is that what you mean when you're giving the balance? Right. Okay.
Amen. A great example of this is a company that I worked with recently. Last year, they took all of their training and they said, we're going to make this more efficient. We're going to put it online so it doesn't need humans. And they lost some of not only their A-player talent, but some of their legacy clients. They didn't know what happened. And when we went deeper, we found out that training is very human. There is an element of needing support and hand-holding and motivation and encouragement. So something that was a decision that was made for the betterment of the company and the efficiency and the bottom line of the company, which is a valid point and decision, was actually harming the very people they serve. And so when you look at your decisions every day, it's not, is this better for the company or is it not? How can this improve our bottom line? Is what's the journey our customers are going through? And at this stage of their journey, is this how they want to interact? And to your point, this is a big trait that we see of human era companies, which is they actually make it very easy to talk to a human. I mean, listen, Ron, you've been in that position as a consumer and or B2B client where it's so hard to get a hold of someone.
Yeah.
And they're doing it for their benefit, not yours. But if you think from your perspective as a consumer, how much happier I would be with this company if they just picked up the phone. So it's really important. It's not that there's one way that's right or wrong. It's really important to think, what do your customers want and deliver that.
But let's go back to this story about Gary Vee. I want to push back at his narrative, which says, yes, it's not scalable, but if your product is getting out there so quickly and so your business is 10X and you need to support the customer, then, you do have to either balance it with technology and adding individuals, right?
Yeah, so absolutely. Gary Vee is in a position where he's in a chairman role, right? He's not operating day-to-day business. However, his role that he plays is paying attention to what's about to happen, to predicting, to looking at patterns and observing society. And so when he says, I have my ear to the streets on the human level, he is saying that he is getting as real and as close as possible to what real people are saying. So right now in our state of business, we are in a severe crisis of trust. There's some data that came out in 2015 that showed trust across big institutions is plummeting by an average of 20%. What does that mean? Not only big business, it's also looking at medicine, it's looking at education, it's looking at government and other big institutions. People don't know what to believe anymore. So the more you can be real in your business, in your operations, in your processes, in your CX, your brand, your EX, and your culture, the more you will connect to your customers, because what is real is what's believable. And that's what Gary Vee is paying attention to.
So let's go back to one of those points. So for those listeners that have 2, 3, 4, 500 staff, 1,000, 10,000, how do you encourage and build a culture where in this quick, digital age that the employees can then be relatable to the customer and bring back in compassion and connection? How do we do that?
Well, how do you think we do it, Ron?
Well, I was just on a podcast that was talking about, in my book, Outrageous Empowerment, we talk about a decision-making process. And, because I think that, one, at a high level, in my last business, we obviously hired for empathy. And if someone didn't match our criteria for empathy, then we felt that they couldn't connect with our customers. But two is, the subtitle was Give People Their Brains Back. And we talk about this methodology of autonomy and giving a framework. And so we tell everybody, look, if you're going to do something, ask 3 simple questions. Is it the right thing for the customer? Yes or no? Is it the right thing for our purpose? And, back then it was change the security industry. And 3, are you willing to be accountable? And that allowed some safety. It allowed some autonomy and some guidelines and a framework to make decisions and move. What else are you seeing? Are you seeing other people have a different strategy, or what are your thoughts on that? And what else are you seeing?
Yeah, it's I applaud you for that. That's great, because it starts with the leadership setting the expectations. So often we see companies say, we don't want workaholics. We want people to have a healthy, work-life balance, but then they're emailing in the evening. So their actions are actually, counterintuitive to what they're saying. And so I really appreciate your effort there. So one is making the ask. At Toyota, we would always say, if we're in a room and we don't know the answer and we're trying to rack our brains because we're, at a high level in headquarters trying to solve big problems, and we can't get to an answer, we go straight to what we call Gemba. And Gemba in Japanese means the front line. And the idea of that is that the people who understand your customer best is the front line, the people that actually talk to the customer. And that's what Gary Vee is attempting to do. And so what does that mean? It requires a great deal of humility and humbleness on the part of leaders to say, I don't know. Let me ask the people that actually know. So if you have a call center of 200 staff and you're trying to rack your brain and solve big problems using big data can tell us whatever stories we want. So we have to be very cautious of that. If you're trying to solve big problems with big data, actually go to the front line, talk to the people that talk to the customers, and ask them, what are our customers saying? What are our customers asking for that we're not delivering on? How can we provide more wow moments for our customers? And those people will tell you an answer because they listen to the customer every day.
Yeah, I think of a couple things back to our business today. One of my companies is in affordable living real estate. So we've got 600 plus units across Canada, and we have the same thing, decision-making process. And I think about what you're talking about, and the process of getting people involved in those types of conversation also is one of the first steps in creating a stronger culture where someone feels quite important and connected to the bigger business,
Yes.
to the bigger purpose or mission, whatever that is. And it's not just, I'm not just at a call center answering the phones now you're asking me to help you solve a business challenge. And we had a speaker on it not too long ago. We talked about this in the new book, Scaling Culture, which was one question. It was Kevin Crenshaw that wrote Never Boss. And he said the question he likes to ask is, look, Hilary, what do you see that's slipping through the cracks? And I love that question, right? What do you see that's slipping through the cracks? Because then you're really, you've got a narrow focus on a question. And, I think I used to make this mistake by talking to stakeholders and say, what can we be doing better for the customer? I felt like now knowing what I know today, that's too broad. And I might not have the relationship for you to be confident, vulnerable enough to answer that because you might feel you're going to offend me. And so now how I position that is I will say, hey, Hilary, I need help with this challenge and I'd love your counsel in that. I really could use your help. Let me position an issue that I see. And what are you seeing? Am I accurate or not? And can you help me with that? And that's been helpful. What are your thoughts on how do you approach the front lines? What's a conversation look like?
Well, you said something really important in that, and I really want to hone in on that, which is they have to have trust in the relationship. And this is something where, as Westerners, as Americans, we really struggle because the way we operate our businesses are in silos where we treat people like a cog in the wheel. I mean, we run our businesses with machine-like efficiency on purpose, and we're able to operate in a way that's unheard of 50 years ago. It's amazing, right? However, people feel robotic. And if you look at your business's silos rather than the holistic perspective of what the humans that are going through your businesses are experiencing, both employees and customers, you really risk not having that relationship. Because you say, oh, sales rep is just a sales rep. He just needs to perform in his job or he needs to get out. That CS manager is just a CS manager. They just need to perform in their job or get out. So I want to push a little bit there because I think a lot of business owners want their people to be empowered. They want them to take ownership, but they don't give the ownership permission to them. They treat them like a cog in the wheel. And so if you want your people to take ownership, you have to connect them to what the business strategies are, the bigger purpose of the business, as you mentioned. And what does that mean? It's really as simple as saying our purpose is, let's say you're in restaurant tech. Our purpose is to create memorable moments for families and friends. Okay, then always use that language and say, listen, as we make memorable moments for friends and family at restaurants, here's how you play a role in that. Here's why what you do is so important. So it really comes into everyday language and relationship. And this is unfortunately stuff that you can't standardize, you can't automate this to make someone feel like not a cog in the wheel. Then you can ask for their ideas once that trust exists.
Right.
Otherwise, they won't tell you.
And so let's go back to Toyota. I'm always really curious about that brand, and I've looked at that. The big book. I forget the heading of it, but it's you're right.
There's a lot of them. The Toyota Way or the Toyota Production System.
I think it is Toyota
The Machine
Way.
That Changed the World. There's hundreds of books. Yeah.
So what do they do?
Yeah.
Once it happens. So Hilary, I'm Toyota. You're a new employee, and you do something that connects with our purpose. You do something that lives our values, or you bring some innovative idea. What do we do? How do we deal with that?
Great question. So we had formal, obviously, just to be 100% clear, I don't work for Toyota anymore. I've been writing and speaking and consulting on topics around culture, operations, CX, et cetera, for the last 10 years. Yep. However, within Toyota, one of the myths is around how formal Toyota actually treats these activities. It's a combination of very formal, high cost initiatives that are Kaizen oriented. And then there's very casual initiatives. So example, we were doing a big project in the Philippines back in 2010 that was to streamline the forecasting of demand and supply, the demand and supply process. So obviously you're managing automotive dealerships, which means your stock is very, very important. And every car that sits on the lot is $1 not in your pocket. And so how they predict demand and supply was super critical. So we had this huge process. We had this 1.5 year long project with I mean, on average, our budget was about $100,000 a month. So we were spending a lot of money to try to cut costs. And we couldn't earn the trust of this one human, this one person that ran the whole invoicing process. We didn't know why she didn't trust us. She was hard to work with. She gave us problems. She showed up late, all these typical stories you hear about. And lo and behold, of course, this is in the Philippines, so bear that in mind. But lo and behold, one day I went to her desk and to her work area to ask her a question. And she said to me, I don't have time right now. I don't have time right now. And I was like, well, it won't take more than 5 minutes of your time. I just need to clarify something. I went over to the side of her desk. I looked down, and her desk is so tight, so tightly compacted, back in the corner of her room, surrounded by her team members, that she actually had bruises on her knees. And I was like, what is this? Why is your desk so uncomfortable? And she said, it's always been this way. Don't say anything to my boss. Like, I don't want to get in trouble. And I said, no. So within that day, we took it straight to her boss. We said, this is unacceptable. You have to create a workspace that's, easy to work in and comfortable.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, by giving her space and by solving that immediate tiny problem for her, we actually had her full support and buy-in from that moment on. So one of the things often that comes up in terms of humanizing culture and creating a culture of empathy and relationship and trust to build connection with your customers is understanding what small problems you're not actually solving for your employees. And so you're telling them, hey, think big picture, connect with our bigger strategy, solve these big problems for the betterment of our company. And they're like, I have these asinine problems that you don't give a crap about. Solve those first. So what's the point of this? You can have hairy, audacious, really big initiatives that solve big process problems and operational problems, but it must be combined with solving your employees' problems. So I always say there's a big myth in business right now that we're hindered by the idea of customer first, because it really should be employee first. And Toyota knew that, and a lot of companies lose that.
Mm-hmm. And let's say we get that right. So we listen, we fix your chair, whatever the issue is. So we're really listening.
Yep.
But now it's time. So if you're the employee, Hilary, and I've done that, I fixed your chair. Now I need you to connect and be compassionate with the customer. How do I get you to do that?
Yeah. So there's 6 traits of human-centered companies, and one of them is living out customer empathy. A great example of that is USA Bank. USA Bank has members that are in the military. So one of the things they do is they actually train their new employees by making them eat military meals, like packaged.
Sounds horrible.
Yeah, exactly. What does that do? It makes you have compassion. Like, wow, the things that they do and sacrifice for our country. They also make them wear heavy weighted vests the way people in the Army wear. Mm-hmm. And what does that do? It helps them literally put themselves in their shoes. So what we used to do at Toyota is we would actually train the employees to walk in the shoes of the customer in the dealership before they started selling. As someone in headquarters, in our training, we would often visit the dealerships because our key stakeholders was the dealerships. So a client I was working with that was in restaurant tech recently, in tech, we think we're the gods of the world. I'm not necessarily in tech, but I often solve tech problems that are dehumanizing. But we often think we're the God of the world, but we're actually devoid of humanity. Tech is. And so with this specific company, what we did, because they're in restaurant tech, you have restaurant owners that aren't tech savvy, that don't understand why I need to have 18 vendors for all these different product lines. And so they actually implemented a system where they trained their employees to spend a day with a restaurant owner to really understand their pains and points. So having empathy is not like this fluff idea. There's very practical operational things you can do to train your people to think like your customer.
As you were talking, I was thinking about, when I had the security guard company, during our onboarding, we used a video from ChickfilA, and they have this incredible video. Have you seen this
brilliant brand.
Right?
I don't know which one you're referring to, but I use them a lot as examples.
This is a tearjerker. It's about 2.5 minutes long. We'll post this with this episode. It's on YouTube, and it's a day in the life of a customer. And really what this video shows is, so it's got
great.
It's got people serving customers, and then it's got bubbles for the customer. And it would be like, Sarah just came out of the hospital where her mother was diagnosed with cancer and she's buying a hamburger.
Oh,
And then, Melissa's husband just died 2 weeks ago. John just lost his job and doesn't know how he's going to put meal on the table. And it just has these bubbles for the customers who are just coming up and they don't say anything, but it was saying, we have no idea what our customers are going through. And it's the most powerful video. I'm not tearing up thinking about it, but I could. And so I need to stop thinking about it. It's a great video. And
it's fantastic.
yeah,
and what I love about this example is I really want everyone who's listening to this to take this in. People are yearning for this type of connection. They didn't have it before COVID, then COVID hit, and now they want it even more. And so there's this myth that, oh, being human is not efficient or not productive. But the irony, and I really, because I'm an operations person, like that's my background, that's my expertise. I really want everyone to deeply understand. If you connect with your customer, that will speed up their process through your journey. That will get you faster to the bottom line. That will get you more efficient bottom line because their sales cycle and their length of time with you is more effective. And so the story that you share is so great because there's so much opportunity for this. And I really want to push all of your listeners to lean into that. Because in the business world, we think emotions they're scary, right? What does it mean if I push the envelope and evoke a little bit of emotion? But that's what your customers are asking for because they feel like they're just a number. They feel like they're just another, one of your sales calls and that they don't actually matter to you. And everyone's looking to be seen, heard, and feel like they matter right now.
Right.
And there's some specific things you can do to do that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about those because I think it's important, maybe from the outside, it sounds like this can get messy because, if I'm the frontline employee on the phone and I understand that you're frustrated, how do I go off script? How do I connect with you and say, geez, Hilary, you sound like you've had a rough day. I'm sorry that you're frustrated. How do we encourage people to go off the typical script, which most of us have, to connect with the customer? Maybe that's what you said. There's a few levers maybe.
Yeah. So this can be standardized and it should be standardized. What do I mean by that? You have to create in your training systems the empowerment for your employees to go off script. Great example of this is Southwest Airline. A few years ago, there was a situation where a flight was delayed and the pilot found out that the reason the flight was delayed was because the person that was, not the reason the flight was delayed, but the flight was delayed and the person they were waiting on was actually going to a funeral. And the pilot waited 12 minutes to take off. And anyone who knows the airline industry knows that every minute is $1. It's very easily a big math equation in terms of how much money was wasted. And he went viral. This story was on every cover of every news magazine because he was empowered and trained to make the right decision. Sometimes doing what's right, quote, doing what's right, is not actually the right decision. And that's where standardization is risky. And so you have to train your people in what scenarios do you have the empowerment to take off script? And if you take off script, how much leeway do you have? And that just depends on what business you're in. But the more you can train your people to do that, absolutely. If you have, calls, like a call center in your business.
And that brings me back to, because I'm thinking as you say this, because there's some big ranges, right? In this situation, you can only do that. And I go back to our 3 questions, because we try to create a range that would probably cover off most things. And the theme that I'm hearing is, again, this pilot had to have felt safe to make the decision. If he or she doesn't feel safe, it's over. If I feel like, oh my God, I'm going to make this decision, it's the right thing for the customer, but I don't know how this is going to go. So if you create a framework and safety that how it's going to go, Southwest's going to pat me on the back for this, then you've got the green light and to make some pretty spectacular
and then they
things
did.
happen.
Southwest actually came out and applauded the decision. I often say there's no AI in love.
Because it's LOVE.
Because it's LOVE. to love and to care is something you have to hire for and train for, and then reinforce and reward. That's your cycle. Hire, train, reinforce, and reward caring communities. What we often do in businesses is we reward efficiency. You know, that call center rep that gets off the phone the fastest, or that sales rep that closes the most deals, but they might not actually be the core customer. So hiring for that and training to be a caring organization is not easy. And it's a huge responsibility on leadership versus just randomly hiring for a position and then wondering why that position is not often retained or the person leaves early because it's not creating a culture of caring by any means. There's actually some...
I was just going to say, but once you have them, the last step is, I love what you said. Let's pat on the back. Let's celebrate love, you know?
You have to celebrate, Ron. So many organizations right now I see, they're creating these machine-like efficient organizations, which is fantastic. I mean, freaking love operations, okay? However, your people are human beings. And right now with COVID, it's very complex. We're not going to go down that right. But there's a lot of issues going on in the world. They have real struggles at home. They have confused boundaries, confused identity, social issues going rampant. And so if you don't acknowledge that and show them love for that, you're not going to get what you want out of them. So there's some very specific things that companies can do in terms of, like, when I often say how to humanize, because you can say, okay, great, I'm bought in. I want to be a human-centric company. I see the light of this. People stay around longer. I create brand loyalty, etc. But how to humanize? You mentioned one, storytelling. It's scary. It's uncomfortable. It's emotional. But here's the science behind it. You have the limbic brain and you have the neocortex. The neocortex is the what and the limbic brain is the why. That's why Simon Sinek built Start With Why. The idea is it's not people, yes, need rationalization, but they first need the emotional connection, which is through the limbic brain. So they need that storytelling first to then figure out the what. And often what I see in people's sales processes is they're just selling products and service. They're just selling features and benefits. And if you continue to just sell features and benefits, especially in the tech space, you're going to run yourself into the ground because you're only going to compete on price and margin, and you're going to have no differentiator. You need to sell an experience. And humanizing your experience is the differentiator. So storytelling, using humor, designing for feelings. If someone's exciting during the onboarding process, make it exciting. Very often, onboarding process is all like paperwork and, logistics and, let's get your final, billing statements set up. And they make it this rudimentary process when someone's the most exciting. So design for feelings. There's many other things that we can talk about, but those are some of the top ones that I see best practices.
I love that. A few years back, I took the Harvard Extension School design thinking course, which is exactly
Fantastic.
that. It's functionality meets feeling. So if function A to function B to function C, does it function properly? And then the other side is emotionally, how do you feel from going from step A to B? If you feel frustrated, you fail. If you're excited, if you have wow, you win, I think you're spot on. And I think we don't think about that enough. We think of function, not feeling, and miss half the equation. And so, look, I also want to...
process. No, it's okay. Every process is a human experience. And it's really important, even in your automations, there's a human behind that automation. There's someone reading that email. A great example of this is I just signed my second book deal, okay? This publisher, I changed publishers, slightly controversial for anyone who knows has written a book. And this publisher has blown it out of the water. When I paid my invoice, I got an email from the accountant with a GIF of her waving.
Scribe.
Yes. All right. We'll just give them a shout out. Freaking love what they're doing.
We've got Max Tucker on the show actually coming up.
Amazing. Fantastic. So Max Tucker, shout out. I'm sorry, Tucker Max.
Sorry, Tucker Max. That's right.
Yeah.
I'm dyslexic.
That's funny. You can edit that out.
No, I'm
no,
keeping
just kidding. I'm keeping it. Tucker Max, shout out to you. So back to the story. When you're designing automations, be very particular about the language you use. One of the tactics around how to humanize is using original language. We see all these canned responses, corporate jargon, use original language. This email that I got when I paid my invoice in full was about 3 sentences long. And it was like, hey, don't you hate when you're really excited to pay for something and you receive a canned response? We do too. We want you to know that there's a real human behind this. And then there's this accountant with glasses on and a pink background waving like her fists in the air, excited for you. And I integrated it into my keynote because I was like, this is such a great example of automations done well. I'm not anti-tech. However, if we always said at Toyota, you want to use the right tool at the right time at the right place. And you don't want to use a hammer when you need a screwdriver. And that's what's happening right now. Everyone's just implementing tech, not designing it for the person going through the experience. And so much of it is falling flat on its face. And then they wonder why they're not getting the outcomes they want. You automate stuff and it's really important to understand that automation is just an amplification of your operations. If you don't design the operations first, you're just expressing it and exponentially growing poor processes.
Yeah, well said. No, I love that. And I knew the email as soon as you talked about it because I shared it with our team and said, this is pretty smart, right? Yeah.
Well, and then what did I do? I actually stole. So here's an important thing. You can steal a concept, but you need to make it your own. So I actually stole the idea, the tactic, but I integrated it into my onboarding process instead of my, invoicing because I loved it. It was fantastic, especially in COVID where everyone's dealing with people digitally.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, I also want to talk about, you talk about building a culture where people embrace all sides of ourselves to impact the business. Tell us more.
Yeah. So if you're a business owner out there, you're probably feeling exhausted. You go in, day out. You love what you do. You love your customers, but there's not a lot of meaning and joy in it. And right now we live in a world where culture and society have forced businesses to become more human because the world is becoming more human. We're traveling more. We're getting married later. We're spending money on experiences rather than things. And these very formative parts of our culture are allowing people to show up more as themselves. And they're demanding it out of businesses too. And so we live in a world now where as a business owner or as a business, you can show more sides of your business. You can show behind the scenes. You can have a say in social issues as a way to connect with the very people you serve. You can show up at Burning Man and put it on your business account and show it as a side of you as a way to connect with customers rather than something you need to hide or be ashamed of. We've never lived in a world like this before. And I am a huge advocate that people are yearning for this. And so as a business owner, have more fun by showing more sides of your company. It doesn't mean you have to have a say in everything, but figure out what your human way is. What are the parts of yourself that you're not showing that if you did show would be more whole as a company and would actually connect with your customers or employees?
And what about the other side of that, Hilary? Where we've heard so many times where a leader is going to post themselves at a big party and it's showing a side that maybe we don't want to show.
Well, listen, you got to provide some context, right? I think it applies for some people. I don't mind saying that I go to Burning Man because of the work that I do. Now, there's some context where it might not be appropriate. Like if you run a nursing home, that you might want to think twice about that. So, of course, you want to put a lens to it. But if you think through, how does your company want to show up in the world? What do you want to stand for? Not just your values, but what do you want to stand for as a company? And what parts of your company's identity are you not showing? For example, there's this great tech company out of Austin, Texas that I work closely with that has a lot of moms that they rehire and coach to come back to work. But they don't really talk about it openly. It's a credible thing that they do. They do it because it's natural to them and it just happened that way, but they don't really talk about it. And they actually looked at it as a potential risk if they talked about it. And so we kind of leaned into that and said, would it be like if you told those stories? What would it be like if you celebrated what you're doing for women coming back to work? Because about 50% of their staff was women coming back to work. And they created this whole program for them. And it actually not only created a huge, huge increase in their social proof and reputation online, but it also helped them attract more high quality candidates. So ironically, we're often trying to put a facade on to show up as a certain type of company, polished and put together and perfect. But it's those things that make us unique and flawed that attract the people that we're looking for.
Yeah, and that's back to, Francis Frey talks about the three trust wobbles, and one of those being authenticity, right? Showing your authentic self. That's great. Well, look, in closing, is there anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to discuss today?
I want to put that back on you. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you want to discuss today?
I guess I'm curious from your perspective, because you are well connected with automation. What is the future of this? Is it just to get your employees involved, keep things simple? What does the future look like? What do we need to be thinking about 10 years out? Or
Thank you. That was a great question, Ron. So, quick story from Toyota. Many people don't know this, but if you go to Toyota's either manufacturing plants or dealerships and ask them for a tour, they will give you it. They will show you around. They will show you their products. They'll show you their processes. And the reason is they say openly, this is not what makes us special. What makes us special is mutual respect and how we treat people. That's our secret sauce.
Interesting.
What does that mean in today's world? Where tech and automation is going, especially because of COVID, everyone's talking about digital transformation. It's undeniable. It's the necessary evil right now. You have to make that transformation and shift to a more digital process and experience. When you make that shift, be very careful how you're treating people, not just your employees, but also your customers. Why? Is because very often what makes you special will get lost in that shift. I actually don't think technology is how people are going to compete in the next 5 to 10 years, because technology is becoming homogenous. It's all looking the same. We started with this wide scope of a bunch of different types of feature sets, and it's all merging into one faster than the human can even understand. You look at financial services, they're all using the same tech. Insurance, they're all using the same tech. Why would I go to Charles Schwab versus Wells Fargo? It's going to be experience. It's not the tech. The tech is all looking the same. Now, I'm not talking about your anomaly techs out there. Put those aside. Those are always going to be your unicorns and those, shapeshifters of the world. But I'm talking about the everyday commodity tech. And you're going to commoditize your business straight into the ground if you look at your differentiator being your tech. I believe there's a great quote from Jack Ma from the 2018 World Economic Forum. And he's being interviewed by someone saying, what's the biggest problem you see in society? And he's talking about education. And he says, what we should be teaching our children is not tech, coding, programming, scripting, etc. Because imagine in 10 years when robots can do that better than we can. And he said, what we need to be teaching our children is human skills, things that make us unique to humans. I believe tech is elevating humans to work on more meaningful work. No one should be doing data entry, for heaven's sakes. It's not human. What does human work mean? Creativity, original thinking, compassion, teamwork, collaboration, a dying skill. Original thinking is a dying skill. Everyone just copies each other's shit. So these types of things, teamwork, I think I mentioned teamwork. These types of things, art, sports, are what make humans unique and able to create in the world. And that's the unique differentiator. The more you can teach your employees that, the more talented your employees will be in the future, the more ideas they will come up with for your customers, and the stronger your business will become. I believe the future is in human-centric leadership and skills, not in tech.
I love it. And with that, I'm doing a mic drop. That was beautiful.
How so? What did you relate to?
That was great. I just think that it is something we need to be thinking about. And that quote that you said makes it kind of more black and white. I don't think there's a debate anymore. It just becomes, no, of course, when a computer can build a computer,
Exactly.
and, we hit that, what's that called? Theory of, what do they call that? Where a computer can make a computer theory, not relativity. I can't remember. Anyways, they'll code everything. They'll solve all these problems. And so it's those human, compassion, all the things that you talked about that I think you're spot on. I think you're futuristic. Is that what I call that? Is you're a futurepreneur?
Yeah, one of those things. Listen, I'm an advocate for people, and I'm an observer of society. Having lived across the world, speaking multiple languages, I see that our world is becoming more one. And the more we embrace the idea of our shared humanity, and the more we design for connection, the stronger your business will become. It's just undeniable. Anyone can be in business right now, and you're constantly at threat. So the way you connect with your customers and retain them is by building trust, because we are in a deep, deep crisis of trust where no one knows what's believable. And that's through design and emotional thinking and hiring, recruiting, and training on these concepts.
That's great. Well, Hilary, look, thank you so much for your time. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. It's been great to get to know you better and talk to you more.
Absolutely.
So, I really appreciate your time today.
Awesome. Well, if anyone wants to find out more about me, I am the most opinionated on Twitter at Hilary Corna. There's only one of me. I am the most personal on Instagram, and I write the most on LinkedIn. You can also visit my website where we have the Human Way Manifesto that you can download and share with your team to understand these concepts in more detail.
Beautiful. Well, thanks again. And thanks for all the work that you do.
Thank you, Ron.
For more information about Hilary or anything else related to scaling culture, please visit the show description for detail. And if you're enjoying the Scaling Culture podcast, please subscribe and share with your network.